Welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're going to unravel a massive literary mystery, one that connects the deep, ancient world directly to the stories and traditions we still know today. We're going to look at how humanity's very earliest stories didn't just disappear over time. Instead, they evolved, they disguised themselves, and they've been hiding right in plain sight.
Let's dive right in with a question. What in the world do a Russian princess from folklore, an Abrahamic prophet, and an ancient Sumerian god actually have in common? I mean, on the surface, absolutely nothing, right? They exist in completely different times, completely different cultures, and entirely different genres of storytelling. But, as you'll see by the end of this explainer, these seemingly unrelated characters are actually just different reflections of the exact same ancient archetype.
Section 1. The Dying Vegetation God. Okay, to crack this mystery, we really have to start with a foundational concept from antiquity, and that's the personification of the agricultural cycle. You see, for ancient people, the death of crops in the winter and the miraculous rebirth in the spring wasn't just weather, it was theology. They personified this cycle into a divine figure, a god who dies, literally goes to the underworld, and then resurrects. And the engine driving our entire explainer today is a concept called myth reduction. Basically, imagine these grand, cosmic deities slowly stepping down from the clouds. The source text outlines that as human civilization matured, we didn't need everything to be about magical gods in the sky, so the story is adapted. Deities were slowly transformed into grounded, earthly, mortal characters.
Across all these different cultures, this ancient blueprint almost always follows 4 incredibly strict steps. Step 1. A powerful woman falls in love with a man of unimaginable beauty. 2. The man rejects her advances. 3. The scorned woman causes his exile or his death, which sends him to the proverbial winter or underworld. And finally, step 4. The man resurrects or returns, bringing the spring. Now, our source does note a rare exception in the Indian story of Rama and Sita, which actually reverses this flow. But otherwise, this ancient playbook is incredibly rigid.
Tracing this through history is just wild. The earliest known versions start way back in the Sumerian era with the god Dumuzi and the goddess Inanna. But watch how the names change as empires rise and fall. In Babylon, they become Tammuz and Ishtar. Over in Iran, it's Siavash. And eventually, the source text argues this transitions right into the Abrahamic era through the story of Joseph. The core blueprint survived by simply changing its cultural wardrobe over time.
Section 2. The Fall to Earth.
So let's look at how myth reduction actually shrinks these characters in practice, specifically the women. In the earliest, most divine versions of the story, she is literally the goddess of love and beauty, an absolute equal to the vegetation god. But as the myth plummets to Earth to become more realistic, she loses that cosmic crown. She takes on a much more grounded human role, often becoming a mortal stepmother. We see this perfectly captured in the Persian myth of Siavash. Get this, in the oldest tellings, his stepmother, Sudabe, was a peri, which is a literal fairy. That proves the story's ancient magical roots hadn't been fully cut just yet. But in later, further reduced tellings of the exact same myth, Sudabe loses her fairy wings entirely. She gets completely humanized into a regular mortal stepmother.
Moving on to Section 3, Siavash and Joseph.
When we compare these female antagonists side by side, a really fascinating pattern emerges. On the Persian side, Sudabe still retains a little bit of that magical mother figure energy, but then consider Zuleika from the Joseph narrative. She is entirely human, acting purely as a caretaker. Our source argues that Zuleika's completely mortal status points to the Joseph story being a highly reduced version of this older vegetation myth.
Section 4. The Russian Parallel. Now, if you thought this only applied to the Middle East, well, think again. The parallels between the Russian fairy tale of Masha and the biblical story of Joseph are honestly astonishing. Betrayed by jealous siblings? Check. Both possess secret revealing abilities, whether that's a magic plate for Masha or dream interpretation for Joseph. Check. They even use the exact same absurd alibi. The siblings return home claiming, quote, a wolf ate them. And the climax? Both rise from death to rule. Masha becomes queen of Russia and Joseph becomes a ruler in Egypt. It is the exact same blueprint.
But here is the detail that truly gives the whole game away. After Masha is supposedly killed in the woods, a magical plant grows from her grave. The source emphasizes that this is absolutely no random detail, it's the smoking gun. It's a direct, lingering echo of the ancient vegetation god archetype, proving that Masha, exactly like Siavash and Joseph, is a direct descendant of the myth of winter death and spring rebirth.
Section 5. The Face of Spring. These stories aren't just, trapped in dusty old books. People actually celebrate them today. Take the Persian New Year figure Haji Firuz, who acts a lot like a familiar holiday mascot. His face is painted black, not as a racial caricature, but to signify his literal return from the dark ashen underworld. And his red clothes? They represent the innocent blood of his martyrdom. He is a living, dancing connection to the resurrected vegetation god. He's the literal herald of spring.
And you can totally see these survival threads over in ancient Greece, too. The Greeks had their own variants of all this. The famous story of Demeter and her daughter Persephone being taken to the underworld is certainly one form of this myth. But our source actually points out that the story of Aphrodite and Adonis is an even closer match to the standard, highly structured blueprint of the dying and rising vegetation god that we've been tracking today.
Which brings us to Section 6, Literature's Guiding Light. So, we've traced this single myth all the way from Sumerian gods down to Russian princesses. What is the big philosophical takeaway here? Well, the author presents a pretty bold thesis. They argue that studying literature in this kind of comparative way actually frees us from superstition. By recognizing the mechanics of myth reduction, the source claims we can see the ancient agricultural blueprints hiding beneath stories that many consider to be strict historical fact.
So let's wrap this up with a thought. If this comparative analysis holds true, and some of our most revered, deeply held stories are actually ancient vegetation myths in disguise, continually reduced over millennia, what other secrets are hiding in the literature we read every single day? It completely changes how you look at your favorite story, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep reading, and I'll see you next time.